I'm talking to Joel Dignam from Better Renting, who is working on a project that is funded by Energy Consumers Australia's grants program, which is looking at enforcing minimum energy efficiency standards in rental households. So, first of all, Joel, thanks for joining us. Tell us about Better Renting and what are the challenges renters are facing more generally in Australia at the moment?
So, Better Renting is a community of renters working together for stable, affordable, and healthy homes. I started up Better Renting about 3 years ago. And I think the big shift I saw is that renting's become a lot more common, which means that more people are renting long term. And they've also got more people renting as families with children. And so, this means that we need to think about renting and how we can change it so that these people who might be renting for the rest of their lives can actually have good homes. Because at the moment, the sorts of challenges renters face fundamentally, there's this power imbalance, particularly in Australia's market at the moment, where there's a lot of pressure on renters and market competition. And that means that renters can't really assert their rights. And so there's this constant fear of maybe insecurity of having to lose your home, but also a real challenge in getting the sort of your home maintained or kept at a level that you might be looking for, which can be pretty downheartening for people.
Yeah, so there's a whole range of challenges associated with renting. Just on the energy piece, what are the challenges for energy users in regard to renting at the moment? What sorts of specific challenges does this raise?
So renters have a bit of a triple whammy almost when it comes to energy. So often people on lower incomes are more likely to be renting. So they're already spending a greater proportion of that income on energy. And then when most rental properties have worse energy performance. So it's harder to heat them in winter, it's harder to cool them in summer. So people either are in an unhealthy temperature or they're spending a lot to try to respond to that. And also people who might have a pre-existing health condition or a disability are probably more likely to be renting as well. And that can exacerbate these issues. And we do hear from people who, but partly because of that power imbalance I spoke about before, really struggle to get changes here. They might talk to the landlord and, these people are living in the property. They know what it would take to make it more livable. They say, can we get some curtains on this window? Can you deal with this crack? Maybe we could get an air conditioning for summer. But it's really hard to get action. And most property investors in Australia are in a model where they're very disengaged from the property. They're not actively looking to maintain it or keep it at a better standard. And even in response, they're not very good at being responsively available either.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about this power imbalance with the renter landlord relationship, and then it's very much about looking at solutions because thermal comfort is so important and people being comfortable in their homes. Tell us about the energy efficiency standards that you're hoping to address and get in rental properties, and also, how that would be enforced, basically, given the power imbalance that you've mentioned.
So Better Renting has been working around energy efficiency standards since we began 3 years ago. And recently, with the support of Energy Consumers Australia, we've been able to scale up that work, which has been really exciting. So working with organisations now around Australia for minimum standards. So the basic proposition here is that your home should be healthy. And in the same way that a rickety stair is a threat to your health or an unearthed power point, if your property is too cold indoors or it's too hot in summer, that's not going to be good for your well-being and it's a risk. And so the market itself is not addressing that. There's a lot of bad properties out there. And so what we'd like to see is a requirement for property investors to make sure that a property you're renting out can be affordably and efficiently kept at a livable temperature. It's actually pretty basic stuff. And so that would look like government requirements in the same way that there are other regulations in the rental sector. And then probably, when a property might be advertised to rent, the landlord would have to be communicating that they are compliant with that standard. Ideally, we'd also see some proactive enforcement from government, which might be having a hotline that renters could get in touch with, but also having inspections of rental properties. Now, the sorts of things they're talking about, people often their mind jumps to something like double glazing straight away, which is quite an expensive way to make your home more energy efficient. And look, you might do it if you're a homeowner who's going to be living there for 20 years. We're actually really talking about basic stuff that these days is absolutely standard for new buildings. And it's really just the minimum required for a house to be healthy to live in. So making sure that heat isn't going straight out the ceiling if you're trying to heat your home in winter by having decent insulation. You don't want the wind blowing through, so decent draft ceiling and getting rid of cracks. And just making sure that if people are trying to heat in winter, which is still a necessity in a lot of parts of Australia, that they've got an efficient way to do that, that they don't have to be running really inefficient, expensive heaters that often just aren't up to the job at all.
Great. Obviously, this initiative trying to enforce these standards and push for this really requires a lot of collaboration and engagement with other stakeholders and other organisations. Just tell us a bit about the coalition that you're building and how you've gone about doing that.
So one thing that's really exciting about this project is the range of organisations we're working with around Australia. The action on this area is going to come from state and territory governments. So it's been really valuable for us to be building relationships with organisations in different jurisdictions who have those connections and are connected with people on the ground. We've currently got over 60 organisations part of the Healthy Homes for Renters collaboration. And there's a real diversity. So there are social sector organisations who care about affordability for people on low incomes. But we also see health-focused organisations who maybe don't think people should be getting sick, experiencing stroke or getting asthma because their property is too cold in winter. And then there's also an energy dimension to this. If we can make these properties more energy efficient, we're not only cutting power bills, we're also avoiding greenhouse pollution. So a lot of energy and climate organisations also see the logic of this. And that's been really exciting. And part of what I think is so great about this issue is it's really a win-win-win. It's going to be improving people's health, cutting power bills, reducing pollution. And I think that's reflected in the collaboration we have working on this issue.
Tell us about what's upcoming. What are some milestones and some key moments and progress that you kind of hope to see in the next 6 to 12 months? What are things that are going to signal that we're heading in the right direction?
So currently all state and territory governments through what was the COAG Energy Council have committed to a trajectory, and part of that is having a national framework for minimum energy efficiency standards by mid next year. So work is underway on that, and we certainly are keen to see that and be part of that process. What we want to see leading up to that is more state and territory governments actually committing to implement minimum energy efficiency standards and putting some stuff on the table. So Victoria and ACT have already begun work in this area and really modelling what the rest of the country could be doing. But we're certainly keen to see more governments make that commitment as well, because everyone in Australia, even if you don't live in Victoria, should be able to have a healthy home. So we're hopefully getting out there more publicly as the campaign, but certainly seeing more governments responding to this issue and taking action.
Well, Joel, it's a really important project. We've got so many people renting in Australia, and what you're working on in the energy efficiency space, as well as everything else to do with renters' rights and the power imbalance, is really powerful work. So, thanks so much for coming on to share that with us.
A pleasure.